This morning we have two stories about someone being transformed. Two stories where a man went up on a mountain and was changed, and afterward, everything else changed too. The stories are about Moses and Jesus, but they also tell us a lot about the reactions of those around them. Reading these stories this week and reflecting on them has raised a question for me. A question that is resonant with my personal life right now and possibly resonant with yours. The question is, what do we do when people transform in ways we don't like or want? Or to put it another way, how do we respond when somebody reveals something about themselves or their lives that scares or hurts us? Just about any experience of revelation about somebody I thought I knew, I could give you my personal list of those moments where hard revelations have happened, and they've always felt sudden to me because they hit me, right? And probably you've had that too. And they've always felt slightly scary, like finding out that a beloved colleague is retiring. Well, they might have known it for a long time, but the minute I heard it, it felt sudden and slightly scary. And maybe you've heard a story from a friend about something that happened a long time ago, but you didn't know it, and when you hear it, it has an immediacy and maybe changes your understanding of that person. Once my 12-year-old son walked into the kitchen with this huge smile on his face, and I completely freaked out. I was so upset that I had to leave the house and walk around the block several times to stop hyperventilating. What did my innocent lamb of a child do? He had gone to a friend's house, and the friend had shaved off all his hair and took a razor blade and put a vertical line in both of his eyebrows. The sudden change was deeply disturbing. All sorts of inner narratives arose in me, and I had to get away so I could calm down. Technically, that is biblical. The Israelites were waiting for Moses for 40 days and nights, and people don't usually live that long out in the wilderness by themselves. And Moses was up on a mountain. He had no food, no water. As far as they were concerned, he could have been dead, likely was. And then all of a sudden, here comes Moses, walking into the encampment, cradling 2 tablets in his elbows with a big old smile on his face. And when the people saw him, it was not a celebration. They were terrified. It was a horror show. He's glowing. He's glowing. They fled. It's biblical. The revelation of God shone on the body of Moses, and it was sudden and it was scary. Imagine if he came back at night. Yikes! No one was expecting glow-in-the-dark Moses. So, how do we cope when people change? When their news, when their reaction, when their claims shift something for us? How do we move forward when all we want to do is go backward towards what was sweetly familiar? Clearly, I am not a role model for what to do. And neither are the Israelites or the disciples. But what can we learn? I mean, at least Peter, when he saw Jesus in this transfiguration, suddenly, bewilderingly changed. At least Peter made like a feeble effort to figure out what to do. He suggests booths. Let's build some booths. Jesus, great idea. Kind of odd, but at least he's trying, right? I appreciate that. It reminds me of Scott, the dad of the child with the bald head, who said, "Rebecca, why don't you go take a walk?" It was helpful. Peter was trying too, and I appreciate that. The scriptures, they also help us to learn some things, to get insights in how to cope with sudden transformations. First off, we forgive ourselves and each other for that initial reaction. Moses didn't condemn his community when they were afraid. He cooperated with them so they could manage this strange new thing. It took them a while. He had to wear a veil over his face because he kept freaking everybody out. Don't scare the children. You've heard this. Otherwise, he probably didn't walk around at night, so people would not be afraid. He had compassion toward his community. Even Aaron, his brother, the priest of the community, didn't handle this very well. Nobody got condemned. Same with the story of Jesus' transfiguration. Out of all his disciples, he picked 3 people to go up on this mountain, Peter, James, and John, to be witnesses of this amazing moment. He revealed his glory on the mountain right in front of them. Did he do that for them? Maybe the point really wasn't about them at all. They just happened to be there. Maybe Jesus transfigured all the time. He certainly spent lots and lots of time away alone with God. Maybe he hung out with Moses and Elijah regularly, communing with God on the mountain. We don't know. We only know about this time because John, Peter, and James were along for the ride, and that changed everything. And you notice we only know the disciples' side of the story. This is the second thing we need to remember. As we are coping with new revelations about people or situations, we need to remember that our experience is not the whole story. Our experience might not even be the story. How it affects us personally isn't necessarily important at all. There might be more to it, but we can get so flooded by emotion and so overwhelmed, missing the opportunity for growth that is right in front of us. The disciples witnessed something spectacular. They saw the reality of Jesus' divine nature. They saw the guy that they sat with by the fire, the guy they walked beside, ate beside, slept next to night after night, and suddenly he was not the same person. He was so much more. Suddenly his power, significance, mind-blowing connection to God, to time, to space, all of it was revealed, and they were scared. Would the old Jesus come back? Was old Jesus new Jesus? Were they going to die? The story we read in the Gospels is their story. They came off the mountain, and eventually they told it. And after Jesus died and was resurrected, the story probably took on all sorts of layers of meaning as they reflected on it. But the heart of it was the same. Jesus changed. It scared them to death. And God told them, "This is my beloved Son. Listen to him." And they did. They did. They let the story grow. They let the story inform them instead of just being about them. Listening to the person who is forcing us to change, who is transforming our reality, is hard. It's hard to step aside from our first reaction and make space for a different narrative. Sometimes the transfiguration, the change, is a closed door, an ended relationship. We're just being walked to the parking lot by security holding our box of office supplies, and there is no conversation or explanation. It's just our story. However, these moments are opportunities for growth. We can move past our initial reactions and open ourselves to these new things. It takes humility to name that we don't know the whole story. It takes humility to realize that how we see it might not be how they see it. To admit that perhaps none of the story is really about us. even if the situation does include us, we have to remember not to make it all about us. Back at that moment in the kitchen with my 12-year-old, it was about me. I flooded emotionally, the skinhead narrative washed over and blinded me. I walked the block calming myself, saying, what are they going to think about me at church, at my job, when my son goes to Sunday school? What are they going to think? Right? I'm freaking out. Am I alone in this? Have you had this freak out moment with the news, the story, the revelation? Yes. Okay, thank you. Now, imagine how Aaron felt when he was calming down. He had just run away from Moses, his brother, whom he'd been waiting for over a month, and everybody had been coming to him like, when's he coming? And, oh, let's get ready, get the band ready. And he was like, yes, we will get the band ready. We will be ready. We will all be ready. Was he ready? No. He ran just like everybody else. Imagine how he felt as the leader. Perhaps something like, I feel so humiliated. I'm the priest, but Moses outshines me all the time. Literally. He was sick of it. Maybe he couldn't help how he felt in that first moment, right? None of us can. But once he calmed down, he had a choice. He had a choice in how to respond. And those next steps are the critical ones, because every single change, every single revelation life brings to us is a choice towards growth and faith and life. It's a choice. It's an opportunity for us to be transformed, for us to grow and heal and become the people God intends us to be. In 1 Corinthians 13, Paul talks about that progress from child to adult, from faithless to faithful, a process of maturation and self-awareness. He says, when I was a child, I spoke like a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. But when I became an adult, I put away childish ways. Childishness is self-centered. It just is. It's okay. We get it. Children understand every event to be about them. Mommy cried. It's my fault. Right? Children are the center of their own universe, and it's a beautiful universe. It's lovely. There's nothing wrong with that. That's why kids think their normal is everybody's normal. Right? But the dysfunctions of childhood become the dysfunctions of adulthood unless we are willing to explore the story. Even when it hurts. Even when it means we are no longer the victim or the hero. Paul goes on to write, now I know only in part, but then I will know fully, even as I am fully known. Someday, I will know the whole story, and so will you. But for now, we are trying to navigate in a world where everything is partial. Even some of my teeth. Everything is fragmented, and we are trying to do our best in faith. Someday we will see face to face. We will know fully, even as we are fully known. On the mountain with the disciples, as the clouds pulled back, and Jesus went back to normal Jesus, he went to his disciples. He knew them so well. He knew they were freaked out and confused and flooded with fight or flight, like, stay, go, what to do? That is them. And he loved them. He touched them and said, get up. Do not be afraid. Jesus is with us in our crisis. Through the flood of emotions and the anger and the anxiety and the whole mess, Jesus is there as we piece together a narrative that serves our ego and our sense of self. Jesus loves us even while we cry in sorrow for our own wounds. I know this because I have felt Jesus' love for me while I was profoundly self-pitying. Jesus is also there to gently open our eyes and open our minds to the wider story. We don't need to be afraid that we're not worthy. We don't need to be afraid that others won't love us. If we admit that we were mean because we were scared, it's okay. God gets us. God knows us fully. God doesn't just want us to keep reacting to change in ways that ruin us or others. God wants us to grow into adulthood and maturity, to the fullness of Christ, who being in the form of God, humbled himself and became a servant. God puts the bar low so we can cross it. God puts the cross high so we can see it, so we can aspire to be people who release our sufferings and our outrage and walk into wholeness. I'd like to tell you I've gotten much better at coping with change or conflict or someone hurts or scares me. Sometimes I am. Sometimes I'm not. I still flood emotionally, and I suspect I always will. Maybe you're better at it than me. But if I had that 12-year-old today in front of me come into the kitchen with a shaved head and eyelashes, I know this. I would be able to shift the gears on my narrative much more readily. That is the kindness of God working in my life. Life has taught me much more humility, and God has graced me with insights I'm learning, and so are you. We are going deeper into the heart of God as we learn from our mistakes, as we extend forgiveness and compassion, as we humbly acknowledge that how I see it is just one way, and how you see it is just as important. This is how we love one another through conflict, revelations, and the crises that continue to rock. We forgive ourselves, we broaden our narrative, and we take the hand of Jesus. Jesus, who touches us and says, "Don't be afraid. This is faith. This is hope. This is love." May it change us day after day, pain after pain, until one day we look into the glowing face of the Holy One and realize that we are shining too.